It is that time again. Time for a feature presentation.
Well, our speaker tonight is Joe Tocco. He sort of rejoined the club in 2011 after a minor lapse. He had originally joined, he estimates, back around 1976 in his young teen years. And he remembers getting a lot of helpful mentoring from people in the club back then. And he sort of feels like he's repaying some of that by helping people out now. And he is our Observatory Chairman this year and next year. Been doing an awful lot of stuff with all the changes to Stargate. And tonight, he's going to tell us about LightBridge modifications.
Thank you, Dale. How's everybody doing? Appreciate your indulgence. Go to the next slide, Jen. I had the opportunity to buy this telescope, like everybody else here, in search of the ultimate telescope. Like boat, you always want a bigger one. So I had an opportunity. John Rasmussen with the club put this telescope up for sale, and I was fortunate. The right time at the right place with the right amount of money. So I picked it up and I had to disassemble it down quite a bit in order to get it into my car to take it home. And used it at home for a little bit. There were some things about the LightBridge which I loved the image through it. I liked the ease of use, but there was some stuff I didn't like about it. It's really big, cumbersome, awkward. The base is too large to fit through a doorway. You have all the weight kind of cantilevered out in front of your body, so it's uncomfortable to try and carry, even if you break it down into a couple of pieces. I could feel the strain on my lower back when I picked the base up and try and carry it out, and I knew, maybe 10 years from now I wouldn't want to do that, so I had to figure out some stuff pretty quick. Go ahead. The first thing I needed to do was buy a wide field eyepiece for it, because I was using some Plossels, and for 10 years I heard about Naglers, and then the 100-degree field of view eyepieces started coming out. So I ran out and I bought a 14mm 100-degree field of view eyepiece and put it in there. It's a spectacular eyepiece. It's probably my favorite eyepiece still, and it resides in that telescope pretty consistently. Discoveries I made while observing. Putting a 3-pound eyepiece in that telescope made it almost impossible to balance. It just was nose heavy. The scope's too big to move around easily. That telescope could never keep it collimated. It collimated, and an hour later it would be off. The red dot finder that came on the telescope was a really cheap finder. You could push on it and flex it, but full degree, it was terrible. Of course, I had no place to set my accessories and keep them within reach. Beer's always an accessory when you're observing. Obviously, the Michigan eyepieces, and even my secondary would do up pretty quickly. And I wound the power cord up around the base several times, which causes quite a bit of aggravation. So, first thing I wanted to address, I had to get the telescope to balance. Go ahead. This is what I did, right? Get some weights on the base of the telescope to counterbalance the eyepiece. Actually worked really well. I used those for probably close to a year, but didn't look good, didn't look professional. I wanted something that when I put this telescope in my car, I was constantly knocking those weights off the back of it. So I wanted something that was out of sight, very compact, and I didn't have to take on and off the telescope. So it took me about a year to figure it out. But I came up with this steel plate. These are lockdown screws that I've never used on a telescope. They lock the mirror in place for transport. But one thing I didn't talk about in this is that I replaced the springs in there with really beefy springs. So the mirror doesn't move at all in transporting. But I had these conveniently located screws here. I made little dog ears, you know, on those steel plates and fitted it on there, and it replaced the other weights perfectly. As I added a couple of other accessories, I had to add a second plate. So there's actually 2 plates sandwiched together. It's about 10 pounds of counterweight. And it actually sits, it's recessed below the feet here. So I can set it on a concrete surface, I can set it on any surface, and the weights don't touch the ground. They don't get scuffed. I had to paint them white because, you know, I just had to. That balances scope out there very nicely. But again, it's a heavy telescope, and I just added 10 pounds to it, which didn't help. Go ahead. I built a little cart, and I have some little shelf brackets that are just drilled into 1/4-inch holes there. I slip the cart in underneath that, and when I lift the cart up, it just picks the whole telescope up off the ground, and I can wheel it around wherever I want. The one thing I did change is these 2 pneumatic wheels are sitting inside here. I cut little slots in the top of this, and these wheels are now inboard of the outside edges because I went to take the telescope into Seven Ponds and trying to go through the doorway. The spread on these wheels is about 38 inches, and it's a 36-inch door, so a slight modification, but now I can go through a doorway with it. The other problem I had was transporting it in the car. This base, there was no way to break the base down, disassemble it very easily. So I took a chainsaw, not chainsaw, a table saw.
You're working on our observatory with a chainsaw, huh?
I took a table saw to it, and you can scroll through these next few every once in a while. And I dadoed these piano hinges in to a series of cuts that I made, and I staggered all the cuts so that I could basically fold this base up. Go ahead, Jonathan. Okay. You can see that they'll all fold down. Now, if I didn't recess these flush, I couldn't fold these down. The first time I went to do it, I had the hinges reversed, and the first time I went to collapse it, I suddenly realized I was hitting the hinges with the side. So then I had to kind of mortar them a little bit more, or mortise them, and it folds up nice and compact. That whole thing sits about 12 inches high. The other thing I did is I squared the base off. I was carrying this extra particle board for no reason. It served no function, and I didn't want to lift it up and carry it, plus it made it hard to get through a doorway. Since I did all of that, this lower piece here, I've cut into a complete circle, so this isn't even visible anymore. And I realized that that's pretty much how they do most of the rocker boxes on the Dobbs anyway. So that gave me some portability. It's not as portable as that one, but it is definitely much more portable, collapses down, and I basically fit the telescope into my 2011 Malibu. And Emma approves of it. So.
Did you reseal the edges of the, where you cut?
I did. The particle board that Bob mentioned, if I didn't do that, the dew and any dew on the grass would deteriorate this area right here. That would soak up like a sponge, soak up water like a sponge. So.
What'd you do for that? Did you use
It's a marine grade paint. You can see it. Painted it black to seal it up, and I haven't had any problems with it. A telescope in Dryden would sit outside. If I took it out at night, I left it out until morning, and never had a problem with any of that particle board delaminating or swelling or anything like that. So the next problem that I had to address was collimation. And I kind of pulled my hair out with that. Trying to retighten, go ahead. I concentrated on these areas that I thought would loosen up or that they were slipping or something, and you know, I didn't want to tighten them up like with Gorilla Grip. Go back real quick. And I didn't think they were slipping, but I couldn't figure out what else could cause this thing to shift. And then I leaned the telescope down one time, and as I was leaning it down, I felt it. I felt the whole upper tube assembly and trusses and everything kind of shift just slightly in my hands. And I realized that there's 3 screws like this that hold this cast ring on the top of the metal tube. These 3 screws were loose. So these never moved. But this ring assembly and the identical ring on the top, on the upper tube assembly, were both a little bit loose. And so they were allowing the whole thing to kind of shift around as I changed the attitude of the telescope. So these got Loctite, and they haven't moved since, and that cured a lot of the problem. The other problem I had was the secondary, the spider assembly was, as near as I can figure, assembled from the factory incorrectly. So when you look at these, you would think that each one of these comes up and turns at a 90-degree angle. And you would think that you build them symmetrically around the secondary, around the holder, right? So that they all point the same direction. And that's how it was assembled. But if you look here, you see that these two come and they turn this way, these two come in and they turn that way, right? So they're in matched pairs now. Go ahead. This is Steve Green. You guys, a lot of you guys probably know Steve. Actually, it was John Lyons with the Seven Ponds Club was trying to help me collimate the scope, and he realized that there was a couple of problems with my spider. It was built, well, first of all, it was in the wrong position in the tube. We couldn't get it to sit below the focusing tube properly, and it turned out that the secondary arms have a slight bevel to them, and they were assembled backwards. So instead of pulling the secondary assembly up in the optical in the tube, they were pushing it down. So I couldn't get enough adjustment to properly position the secondary mirror. So they fixed that, but then realized that it was off center slightly. And between John and Steve Green, they realized that these arms on the secondary are assembled in pairs, but they're not built going around it symmetrically. So these guys had like the whole top half of my telescope disassembled and scattered on top of a picnic table in Great Lakes Stargaze. And you know, I just kind of stood in the background, scratching my head, hoping it was back together by dark. But they did a great job, and I had some of the best views of Jupiter that I had ever seen that morning at Great Lakes Stargaze. So I was still searching for, you know, the ultimate in collimation. Go ahead. I went out and I bought an auto collimator by Cat's Eye, and when it comes with a template that you lay over your mirror to help you position the center mark. And what I realized is you can see the old adhesive. Yeah. My factory center mark was off on the mirror from day one. Meade probably built some really great telescopes, but this wasn't one of them. It was assembled on a Friday or by somebody new. I'm convinced. But anyway, even with all of its problems, I will tell anybody, a 16-inch telescope, even a mediocre 16-inch telescope, has spectacular views. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But when you start pushing power, you start looking at planet detail or lunar detail, and collimation's got to be spot on. You don't see it in nebulas and galaxies so much, but definitely in planetary viewing. Go ahead. That little center, back up one real quick, Jonathan. This little center mark
Whoops, sorry.
That little center mark, you have to be able to see this visually when you use an auto calculator. So it helps to hold a little red flashlight or something in on that center mark when you're collimating it. So you can visually see it when you look through the telescope. But I was trying to get it set up to do all of this on my own, so go ahead. I had to build something to hold the little red LED that would shine on that. These next few you can just kind of go through at a pretty decent pace. And I found a bracket laying in my garage. I cut it to fit the dimensions I thought I needed and ground the edges down and chamfered the corners and tried to make it look as professional as I could. It's in the optical path, so I had to paint it black. And I mounted it on the inside of the optical tube, fitted it with a little red LED. There's a switch that's mounted that I can access outside the base of the optical tube. And then I power the whole thing with a little lens-sized battery. I didn't want the battery to pop out and bounce off my primary mirror, so I fitted it with a little piece of Velcro that kind of secures it in place. And I screwed that to the inside of the optical tube. And this whole thing sits, there's probably about 1.5 inches on both sides of the primary mirror, so I can play around with some stuff inside the base of the optical tube and not get in the light path. But you flip the switch from outside and it directs a little cone of soft red light right down on that center mark, so I can see it pretty easily. Next item I wanted to address was the red dot finder, and that was a pretty easy fix. They make these that are, this worked fine, it was just the mount was really cheap. It was plastic and it was flexible. But the quickest fix for me was just to replace it with Telrad. I love that. I'm a huge fan of Telrad finders, love them. And it works like a champ. The only disadvantage of the Telrad finder is it dews up quickly, but I have a fix for that too. So. All right, so where do I put my beer? Right? I used to put everything on the table, right? And if I had the table here and I was using the telescope, I could get to it, but if I push the telescope around to look over here, now my accessories are over there, I couldn't get to it. So I wanted something that would kind of travel with the telescope. This is the eyepiece holder they give you. It's 1 2-inch slot and 3 1/4 inch, but I was going to end up with all 2-inch eyepieces, so I had to address that. So I needed a big accessory tray. I worked with what I had. This is the base that I had. I matched the lines, and I built these 2 little support pieces that attached to the back of it, and I built a table out of plywood. Go ahead, Jonathan. Again. It's designed and slotted so that I don't have to use any fittings. There's little T-bolts that screw in here. And once they're in, they're in permanently, and those slots just kind of drop in and then slide down and set on the shoulder of these 2 bolts, one on each side, so that I don't have to, I just set them in place and I'm done. It takes literally about 10 seconds to put that table on the telescope. And it's very secure. Okay. Sealed all the edges and glued it all with outdoor glue and painted it white to match. So this is my accessory table. It travels around with the telescope, and my stuff is always on my right wherever I go. It works out beautifully. Next thing I addressed was the dewing issues, and of course you can buy all kinds of factory-made or manufactured dew heaters and dew strips, but I kind of pride myself on being a handy guy, so I wanted to build it all myself. Built this one out of resistors, and basically I laid out my secondary. I built a resistor array around the perimeter of the secondary. It's a stock mounted secondary, so you only have a little bit of a little bit of area around the outside edge where you can put a dew heater. So I built that, taped it in place, and then covered the whole thing with some high temperature insulating tape. One more. This right here is an adhesive back insulating tape. So hopefully that's holding all the heat in toward the back of the mirror, the back of the secondary mirror, and not letting it kind of drift up across the through the optical path. Of course, I took and I super glued the wires right down the edge of the spider vane, so they didn't obscure any of the light, or not that it would even matter. I don't even think I could have measured the amount of light loss, but in my mind, you know, it's like a placebo. I know it's not obstructing any light if I went right down the edge of that. Put a little jack on the outside of the upper tube assembly so that you know, I can plug the power cord in pretty easily. One more. And then I built dew heaters for my eyepieces. This is a couple of hours without using the dew heaters. They dew up pretty quickly. And I use the same kind of heat. Now this is after an evening, obviously winter observing. So my towel rad was not heated at the time, but the whole telescope was frosted up, and my eyepiece was like perfectly dry, very warm. I mentioned to a couple of the guys, it was really sweet in the winter time when it's like 5 degrees outside and it's bitter cold, and you touch your cheek up to a warm eye cup. It's incredible.
It's like a reward.
It is. It's beautiful. All of a sudden, you know, your eyes water in the wintertime. That all just kind of goes away, and you just, you know, you press it against your cheek. It feels good. So I love the dew heaters work great on the eyepieces. I had to build one for my towel rad, so I did that out of 3 small resistors. There's all kinds of formulas you can come up with to figure out what size resistors to use and what kind of configurations to use them in. I put jacks on all the devices so that I can plug a power cord into them and not have stuff permanently wired to them. You go back, you can see on the towel rad, I had to modify the side of the towel rad and just use some stuff called JB Weld. Some of you guys might know what it is, but it's a 2-part epoxy, and it's like better. It's you know, as close to duct tape as you can get as far as being handy. You can see the resistors right here. They sit right behind the window, and I could go out on the dewiest night, and I can breathe right across the face of that towel rad and fog it right up, and you can watch it just kind of wick away, and it never gets fogged up. This is the same picture as the other one. That was before I had dew heaters on the towel rad. Go back for a second. Right here, you can see the wiring harness. This was me laying out the wiring harnesses. This one goes to the secondary. Obviously, that goes to the towel rad. This one right here kind of comes around, and there's a little service loop to go to the eyepieces. Those are all covered in like an anti-chafing flexible cord cover, and looks nice and neat and orderly now. And I can pull those devices off the upper tube assembly. The wiring harness stays right there, so it's pretty convenient. Go ahead. So the last thing I wanted to address initially was the situation with the power cord, and that seemed to be, well, the logical thing was a battery pack, because, you know, half the time we're out observing, there's no AC power around. So I had a battery pack that I could plug into, but it left me with the same situation as I had before. You know, I'd wind the cord up and yank it out of my little thermos battery pack, or you know, wind it underneath the base into the bearing. So I figured I'd figure out a way to carry some batteries on the base itself. Okay, so since I had the cable on the back side of the telescope, I wanted to kind of balance that weight out. So I hung this on the front, and these are three 12-volt, 7-amp-hour batteries. So they're wired in parallel. So basically, I have 12-volt, 21 amp hours, 12 volts, which will run everything, including my laptop, probably through the night into the next day. It's quite a bit of power. I've never ran out of power. I mean, I've gone on 3-day observing sessions, and it holds power very well. And I charge the whole thing up with a little battery tender. You know, the little battery chargers that condition and charge batteries. They're $35, $40. And I plug it in when I get home, and it's plugged the next time I have to go. It's charged the next time I have to go out. Since I did this, I've changed how this mounts. I have a couple of hooks that run across here, and I just hang it on this front edge. It doesn't get jostled around. It's not like, you know, this thing is, it's not going anywhere. It spins in a circle, and it spun pretty gently. So.
Joe, are those kind of like motorcycle batteries?
Yeah, they're about the
Something
equivalent
like
of a motorcycle
12
battery.
volts?
Yeah.
Try.
You see a lot of these in alarm
try
systems.
They use alarms.
Right.
Lawnmowers.
Right, yeah. These are just gel cell batteries. Go ahead.
That's a good idea.
So this is the battery pack sitting on the front of the scope. It's this telescope is balanced beautifully. You can spin it. I mean, it almost spins too easily. If it gets a little windy, it'll sail around like a weather vane.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Little switches.
Yeah,
Okay.
they snuck into that picture.
Okay.
As far as distributing power to everything, I put in dimmers, 12-volt dimmers on everything, and they're hidden inside the rocker box. You can't really see them, but I can reach in and get to them. The dew heaters, I wanted those to be adjustable, and there's a few other things. I put one on the cooling fan on the back of the primary so I could slow it down when it didn't need to be running real fast, but the primary fan chatters a lot when you run it at a slower speed, so I never use that one. But
Where'd you find the potentiometers you
the
have?
dimmers, they're a pulse width modulated dimmer. So when it comes to dew heaters, these are really good, because
Yeah.
you can put a potentiometer on a dew heater, and all you're doing is you're typically taking and drawing power off of the dew heater
So you're
and
still
burning
using it up.
you're burning it up
Yeah.
through a resistive
Yeah.
load, which is still consuming your battery.
And heating
These
is part
are
of your
pulse width
telescope.
modulated.
Where'd you find
So,
those?
eBay.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But yeah, you can, if you eBay 12-volt dimmer,
Oh, okay.
these will come up.
Okay.
These exact ones, and they're cheap. I bought those for $6 a piece. I think you could buy them for like $3 now. And so they're big. Somewhere, they're coming out of China.
So for the
somewhere, I'm
common
sure.
man, what is pulse width?
Pulse
For the
width
common man and
modulation
woman,
means,
You're turning
in effect, instead of like lowering the power, it's turning it on and off. It's pulsing it on and off. So the dew heaters won't get as hot. They're getting 12 volts, but they're getting it sporadically.
Yeah. That's what Kendrick used the same principle, but the Kendrick cost a lot of money. These are cheap.
Yeah, if you wanted, well, this could be a 3-channel dew heater. If you bought a 4-channel dew heater, it's a couple $100. And this is, at the time, this was $18. And it does the same thing, but now it's $12. So, or not even $9.
So what's this? That looks like a bell.
This is, well, that's a battery charger. So my
Okay.
battery pack, that plugs into this. This is just a 12-volt cigarette adapter.
Okay.
And the other end of my battery pack has a plug. And so, you know, you can flip this up, plug the battery pack in, and that powers this distribution bar. And then, you know, I use this to feed whatever I want to power up on the telescope. Dew heaters, my digital setting circles, you know, whatever I want to use. And it's all self-contained, it's all within the rocker box, nothing to trip on or get hung up on. The mirror cooling, I don't know if that was an issue or not, but what I ended up doing is, I see, you can go to the next one there. This was a box fan that they put on the back of the primary fan, and I just, every time it ran, I thought of air short-circuiting around the edge of the box fan, because it's, I mean, the fan is right there. I wanted it to move as much air from the base through the top of the telescope as possible. So basically, I cut this black mask out of foam cardboard, and it seals the whole back of the telescope so that the air that is drawn into the back of the telescope here can only go from the base of the telescope out through the upper tube assembly, which is what you want it to do. You don't have to blow air against the back of the primary mirror and then push the heated air, the warm air, out the top of the telescope. So, I don't know if it made a big difference, but again, in my tiny little mind, I think it's better. It's a better way to reduce possibility of air just kind of churning around the edge of the fan.
Joe, does your counterweight go over the
Yeah,
top of that?
it covers it, but it's about an inch behind that box fan, so it still moves the same amount of air. And to address nighttime hazards.
Mosquitoes.
This is not a nighttime hazard. This is some of the nice things about being out just at sunset. So the nighttime hazards I'm talking about, Cub Scouts. Doing outreach, doing an open house at Stargate, I've had kids run into the telescope twice. Literally run into it. And not because it wasn't easy to see, they were just playing, you know, they're kids. And it was dark. It was really dark out. So I wanted to come up with a way to keep the scouts from running into the telescope.
To bring your dog.
I could have. I thought it'd be better to light it, and it would look really cool. So now I have these red lights built into the base of the telescope, and I have one that sits underneath the table that kind of washes red light down on the back of it now as well. And it looks really neat, but it is actually very functional. Nobody has run into it since. I worried about light scatter, right? My truss poles, this inside ring was white. The truss poles are anodized aluminum. So I took everything, I went out and I ordered some, what do they refer to it as?
Flocking paper?
Not flocking paper, it's paint, but it's ultra flat black.
Okay.
It's a special order of paint, and it's called ultra flat black. And it is about as flat of paint as you're going to find. It worked really well, so I sprayed the whole inside of the tube, I sprayed the inside lip of the ring, anywhere where the light could hit it. Go ahead. Finally got back to spraying this, which I intended on doing from day one. Go ahead. And I sprayed the inside half of the truss poles. The only reason I didn't do the outside edge is because I have a shroud that goes on there, and I thought that constantly moving the shroud up and down the outside of the truss poles was just going to wear the paint off anyway, and it would end up flaking onto my primary. So I just left the paint off them. It looks a little unfinished, but nobody sees them. I always have the shroud on anyway, so I don't think it's that big a deal. But all the internal surfaces, including the upper tube assembly, are all now ultra flat black.
Now we all know.
Yes.
That's right.
Now they're out there.
I will share one thing. It's tough to keep paint on anodized aluminum. And in talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was. It might have been somebody at Parallax Industries. They told me I should have painted these with 3M adhesive. Spray adhesive.
Oh, yeah.
You paint the surface with 3M adhesive, and then you paint the adhesive, and the paint will not come off.
Right.
And that, to me, was brilliant, but it was after the fact, so.
You can
On my
still-
next
You
telescope,
can still do it.
I could, well, would I have to strip that off, right?
Well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't know that you have to. What-
Just flip
Yeah.
them
You got
around.
the bear, you got the bear side, you flip them around.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't be snooty unless you have a telescope, and have a snoot. I built the snoot, number one, I lived across the street from the high school. That was the primary reason. They stopped turning their light, they put in brand new LED lamps in all the parking lot lights, and because they were such low power consumption, decided they didn't have to turn them off at night. So they burned the parking lot lights all night long. And so there was, you know, anytime I turned toward the southern sky or the northern sky, if I drifted toward the west, I would pick up those lights, and it was notable. I mean, how quickly, see how unhappy I looked? So I built the snoot, I went to the foam factory, cost, I don't know, $12 for that little piece of foam, and I just hold it on there with a piece of nylon webbing with a little clip from REI. So it holds it on nice and secure, and it's stiff enough, it weighs nothing. I think it's 1/4 inch, and it's really lightweight. And I just wrap it around there, and I clip that little band together and cinch up the webbing, and it'll stay on there all night long. And it does a great job. Number one, it is a little extra protection against dew on the secondary, but it eliminated any issues with light scatter coming into the upper tube assembly.
Have you tried not using a dew heater with that on there? You still getting dew in your secondary?
I probably have, but I haven't, it's never
You may
dewed
not
up.
need-
It's
you may
never,
not need your secondary heater.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably not. When I bought that telescope from John, it was, I think he told me it was 10 or 12 years old. So the mirror coatings were, you know, they were old. So I sent the mirror to Nova, I think Nova Industries. They recoated it with 96% reflective coatings, and the mirror looks beautiful. The primary mirror wasn't too bad. My secondary was really hazy. It looked terrible. But I had them both recoated, and like I said, they look beautiful. So that's kind of a no-brainer. I think optics, you know, mirrors, they have a shelf life. The coatings have a shelf life, regardless of how much you take care of them.
How much did they charge you out there?
There was a 16-inch mirror in the secondary. I think I paid $240 to have recoated. 3-pound eyepieces are beautiful to look at, but they cause a lot of problems. Primarily, it was twisting my upper tube assembly. The actual upper tube assembly, the whole focusing mount would sag in the telescope, so I had a little bit of help with this, Milton Anderneck, you guys know Milton?
Yep.
I went over to his house and took my upper tube assembly over there, and he helped me. Basically, we made this little piece in his machine shop in his basement. If you guys don't know Milton, he's built several telescopes, but he's actually fabricated carbon fiber tubes and machined beautiful. Well, he's got a 6-inch refractor, and it has this beautiful machine focuser, and his primary lenses in a cell that he built is beautiful. And his shop is about the size of the area that Jonathan's standing behind. It's in the corner of a basement, and it's one little table, and he's got a little metal lathe there, and he did everything right there. I was fascinated.
He also designed several Corvettes, and
Oh yeah.
he's a very well known and well regarded automotive designer. So that was his life before astronomy.
So we fabricated this, riveted it in place to reinforce this section of the tube, and it helped considerably. That 3-pound eyepiece still flexes. Now instead of flexing the whole thing right here very easily, it flexes it here very slightly, but it still flexes it. So the only way I think to fix that is to rebuild the upper tube assembly completely with something beefy. But it's not really a big issue now. Where's M91? How do I find it? How do I find half the stuff I want to look for? I'm not, I know how to find a fair amount of stuff, but I felt I needed digital setting circles, right? So I added digital setting circles to the telescope. I got another great deal from John Rasmussen on an Argo Navis computer for it. Mounted it right on the upper tube assembly, so it's right where I need it, and it works beautifully. It's the 2-star calibration on it is as simple as they come, and everything's in the field of view every time I use it. So, go ahead. Nothing's ever complete, right? I mean, you're always going to tweak and tune. Go ahead, Jonathan. So, a couple of years ago at Great Lakes Stargaze, I was the proud recipient of a Bill Pierce commemorative edition computer cake. Bill was kind enough to build this to the exact specifications of my table.
Yeah, right.
It was sheer coincidence, but that computer cake fit perfectly. I mean, if it was 1/8 of an inch wider, it would not have fit. It fits snugly into the top of the top edge of the table, and I put a couple of little Velcro tabs in the corners so that the wind can't take it away. And in addition to all my red lighting, I have one red light that runs across the top of the inside of the computer cave. So when I turn the lights on, you know, the inside of that computer cave is kind of washed in red light, which is nice. And I keep everything in there. Keeps the dew off all my spare eyepieces, star charts, maps,
Beer?
whatever. Beer's not always in there, but it is in there on occasion. Whatever I put in there, it keeps dew free. I've even put a laptop in there once, but I know that's why you built them, Bill. So I fit everything in the mail loop. Go ahead. You can just cycle through these next few. They're just. Okay, hold this one for a second. Another thing that I made is an off-axis aperture stop, because it seems to improve the viewing on, well, certainly anytime you look at the moon with the 16-inch telescope, it's blinding bright. So if you stop down on bright objects, you tend to get much better detail, and you have to have it with the moon. Jupiter is another one that you have to stop down. Saturn, I don't know. Sometimes it looks better with it in, sometimes it looks better without it. But definitely when you're looking at the moon. And all it does is remove the central obstruction and the secondaries, or the spider veins.
It makes it into a longer focal length scope.
Yeah, effectively that becomes a 6-inch f12.
12, yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. Okay, so this is basically my trip to Cadillac West Star Party. That's about the most room I had in the car, besides where I sit, right there. I don't, and I didn't take my little ladder. I have a little 3-foot step ladder that I take, especially to outreach for the kids to go up and down. That's usually stuck, wedged in here somehow. That just fits.
You need an
Go ahead.
SUV.
That's my trunk, and there's no room left. I mean, that thing is, it's filled. This is a spare battery pack that I have, and it's got a little inverter in the top, so I can run laptop or 120 volt, whatever I need to run. Primarily, I take it as a backup for my other battery pack, and if I need to run my laptop, I can plug in. There's room for me.
You dropped your keys.
Yes. Shh, that's where I keep them. Shh, shh. Don't tell anybody. Go ahead. Forgot I had to pack my tent after I packed the car up. But I did find room to squeeze the tent in there. There's one abandoned project that almost came through. Go ahead. I want a master control panel. I just thought it'd be cool. You have a bunch of switches, turn stuff on and off. I put a lot of time into building this. Talked my buddy out of a nice piece of cherry, and he milled it down nice and thin for me so I could build it all. And here I had all these, digital setting circles, my cooling fan, dew heaters, my lights. I could turn them all off. They all had LEDs. It was all wired. Hours and hours and hours of work, and then when I got done, I said, "Oh, that looks kind of hokey. I don't think I'm going to do that." And so it sits in the drawer. I don't do any photography with the telescope really, but I have taken, I think, some notable photographs with my iPhone. Considering that they're handheld, these are all through the LightBridge.
Get them out.
Yeah, you can get
Yeah.
hold your camera like that.
Yep. The pictures of the moon are the easiest, for sure. But they turn out pretty good for being handheld
With an iPhone.
with an iPhone. It's not too shabby. These are either, almost every one of these is probably that 14 millimeter eyepiece.
All right.
You can go right through. Thank you very much.
The question for you is, do you know the definition of an armchair astronomer?
Yes.
You just confirmed why I'm an armchair astronomer.
Too much work?
That was his, wait, yes. Great job, though.
Yeah, but
What he's enjoying.
I get
I
that.
know.
Right?
I just couldn't.
I
no,
can do
just-
this, or I can watch reruns of The Fresh Prince.
You know.
So,
Okay, now,
I get that.
Bill,
Joe,
yes,
back to collimation.
yes.
Before you put your aftermarket center spot on your primary,
Mhm.
when you did your collimation, did you finalize it on a star test? By any chance?
I did not.
Okay, because my next question was, if you were able to do a star test collimation without that additional spot, I was wondering how that would ever have come out. So you never did actually?
Yeah, I never did one initially.
Okay.
No, I've done them since then.
With the new spot on?
Yeah, yeah, and they're like perfectly
I
centered.
just wondered with that center spot being off center, how you would ever do an accurate star collimation.
Yeah,
So you never even.
no.
any other questions?
Duck?
Presumably when you sent your primary and secondary mirrors out for recoating, you removed your secondary from the stock. And I was just wondering, what did you do for reattaching it? Did you go with the age-old solution of using like silicone adhesive, or did you go with some other solution?
It's RTV
Okay.
silicone, but it's a high what do they call it?
Adhesive?
Yeah,
Professional
well,
quality.
there's a term that escapes me at the moment, but it's like double sticky RTV. It's more more adhesion, there's more properties to it that makes it adhere to the, it's like the super glue of our TVs.
Do you have any problems with the gluing process?
No.
With any, okay, because I've actually run into some pretty serious problems of gluing secondaries and have tried multiple glues and all of them.
And then they're failing?
Shear off at the
Yeah,
slice
this is a black RTV, and they actually sold it at Home Depot. If I think about it, I'll try and find the tubes, because I still have some left over, but I'll get the label.
Is that, well, we can talk about this
Yeah.
later, but there's some, I've just had some really bad luck with adhesives.
Yeah,
and
I
secondaries.
went online and I Googled it to find out best RTV or best adhesive to use for stock-mounted secondaries.
Yeah.
And there were several sites that listed this brand of, the brand and the specific type of RTV.
Is it a two-part where you mix it?
No, it's not a two-part epoxy. It's just silicone-based RTV. You squeezed it right out of the tube like caulk.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, in the beginning of the program, you know, you're talking about the scope and all the problems, and we're thinking, oh, this is real lemon, you know. And then you go through how you proved it and everything. Looking back, if you had to do it all over again, would you have done it the same way, or would you have gotten a different scope?
Oh, no. I love this telescope.
Do all this re-engineering and improving with anything you get?
To an extent. I mean, if I bought like a Takahashi, I don't know if I would tinker with it too much, but, you know.
What is your
These are
mouth
built, Dob-based telescopes are built to be tweaked and modified and tinkered with and customized. I mean, they're like the hot rod of astronomy. So,
Any
but I
scope
would-
is basically a kit.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, finish it.
Did
Go
you
right.
refer any of these problems to the manufacturer?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did
They,
you get any feedback?
They could care less.
yeah, they didn't care. They
Well, I'm
didn't
sure
care.
that guy that put it together on Friday at 4 o'clock got a
Yeah.
stern talking.
I actually,
No, 'cause he lives in
12
China.
years ago.
yeah, I actually have the mirror itself. I sent the mirror to Mike Lockwood, who's he's of the caliber of Carl Zambuto, different size mirrors, but he's a master mirror grinder. I sent it to him to have it tested, and he told me it's one of the worst mirrors he's ever seen.
Worst?
Come out of the factory, one of the worst. But it's because of there's a massive hole in the middle of the mirror. He said he's never seen any. He says he doesn't know how that it even came out of the Meade factory the way it did. But it sits right behind the secondary, so it's not in the optical path. So, he said there was nothing he could do to really improve significantly. He says the mirror outside of that it's a decent mirror, but he says that hole in the middle of the mirror is just. He says it's brutal. I'd get on the
It
phone
looked-
with Meade and scream at him.
In the picture of the alignment circle, the collimation circle, it just seemed pretty extreme. But
Yeah. Outside of that, the only other problem with the mirror is it's got a bad anneal. And he said, the only way for him to fix that is to basically turn that mirror back into a blank. He's got to melt it down and re-anneal it to correct that. And he says then, basically you're starting with another piece of glass. So it would cost, in order to improve that optically, it would cost me about $3,000.
oh wow!
To have somebody like Carl Zambuto or Mike Lockwood, even Steve Swayze was like $2,600 to try and fix the mirror. The other two guys didn't look at the mirror, but like I said, Mike Lockwood is notable and respected. He said, it's not worth doing anything with. It's it's going to give decent images the way it is, and the anneal is only going to show itself when the mirror is cooling. while it's going through the process of cooling. Once it's cooled, that problem isn't going to be evident at all. So,
Any other questions? Yes?
So what have you done to your car?
nothing.
Next thing you need to do is an SUV, is what you need.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, actually, I have.
That's for his
I have-
24-inch.
I have relieved John Lines of his 2002 Chevy Astro, which is aptly named Astro.
Yeah.
That's gonna be my astronomy van.
You could call it the Warren
Astronomy.
Astronomical.
Driving the telescope.
Well, let's
Yeah.
thank Joe again.
All right, so after our Macomb meetings, we do still have gastronomy